Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen, and I'm joined by my usual broadcast partner, former NHL defenseman Tom Laidlaw, who played 11 seasons for the New York Rangers and Los Angeles Kings. This is the Laidlaw and Allen Report. Come to you twice a week to talk all things hockey, and today the subject is Anthony DeAngelo. And we have with us Vince Mercogliano, who's the beat writer for LowHud.com. He's also part of the USA Today network. And Vince, welcome to the show. You're the perfect guest to help us sort out what in God's earth happened when that caused the Rangers to put DeAngelo on waivers.
Well, the final straw, if you will, as has been reported all over the place now, it started with The Athletic, who had the initial report, was that after the game on Saturday night against the Pittsburgh Penguins, which the Rangers blew a third period lead for the fourth time in the last 5 games, lost in overtime on a Sidney Crosby goal. The report was that after the game, there was an altercation of some sort between Tony DeAngelo and goalie Alex Georgiev. The details on that are still coming out. Yesterday, David Quinn didn't want to talk about it, but did say, I should be able to give you guys more in 24 hours. I think they're waiting to see what happens with waivers now that we know the Rangers have put Tony DeAngelo on waivers. Any team can claim him up until noon today, Monday. I don't believe that is going to happen from what I've gathered. I would be pretty shocked if a team wanted to touch him right now and take on that contract, which has an average annual value of $4.8 million for this season and next season. So the Rangers are in a bit of a sticky situation. But this, as we touched on last time I was on with you guys, this has kind of been building. There's been a pattern of poor judgment from DeAngelo that the Rangers were getting fed up with, and this clearly was the final straw.
So there's only a handful of teams that have enough cap space to even think about picking him up if they wanted to, right? And I'm assuming from all reports, the Rangers have tried to trade him before and obviously couldn't get anything done. So you're right. It doesn't look like anybody, I hate to say it like this, really wants to take on like now that contract and the attitude from the player.
Yeah, exactly. The Rangers, now the situation the Rangers were in the offseason was interesting because they had their doubts. I know that especially once the pandemic hit, when DeAngelo and all of us were home and he was being very active on social media and not only engaging in politics, which I think they view as one thing and they never really gave him a hard time about, but he has this way of antagonizing fans, engaging with fans, arguing with fans. There was an incident over the summer where he even ended up challenging a fan to meet him outside of Madison Square Garden for a fight. I know the Rangers took issue with that and spoke with him about that. Tony DeAngelo deleted those tweets shortly thereafter. And so the Rangers were kind of in this spot where they were like, all right, this guy is causing us some headaches off the ice, but he was also coming off of a season in which he scored 53 points, was tied for 4th among all NHL defensemen in points, and they felt like had really broken out. The Rangers, like especially when David Quinn got here, his first season, now we're talking 3 seasons ago, they put a lot of time into DeAngelo and trying to get him past those maturity issues. There were nights when he was a healthy scratch and they had their ups and downs, but they felt like he broke through last season. So they felt like they had a quality player. They didn't have a clear replacement if they let him go, but they were concerned a little bit at the same time about these off-ice headaches. So they did explore the trade market. But my understanding is Jeff Gorton did not find anything that he felt like was worthwhile value, and they ultimately decided that they wouldn't give him a long-term contract, but they at least wanted to hold on to the asset for a couple more years. They gave him a 2-year bridge deal, and I think they assumed that if the right deal came along down the line, they might be able to explore a trade then. Now that trade value is kind of shot with all the other stuff that's going on since he signed that contract, so now they find themselves in a tough spot.
Vince, I want to amplify a little bit a point you made at the start of what you just said there when you were talking about that it wasn't just the politics. I've seen a representation on Twitter of people saying, well, he's being persecuted because he's conservative. Well, there's a lot of conservative NHL players. Like that really wasn't the issue. It's, how he took it to the next level as you said, challenged, at one point somebody to a fight outside the arena, and it's behavior beyond, what his political viewpoint is. It has been, and this is his, third organization. And every organization that he's been in, there's been some kind of issue, and he has a personality, as my understanding is, that sort of grates also on his teammates, which causes some tension as well. Can you just sort of address what you've observed on that? I know there are plenty of guys that like him, but can you sort of explain, what his personality is about that causes the issues?
Yeah, well, you touched on a lot there, but if you go all the way back to his junior league playing days, when he was in the OHL, he was suspended twice that I know of, and I know that it was the harassment, abuse, diversity policy that they said he violated at the time. I'm not going to speculate on exactly what he said. I've asked around and heard different things, but he said something that violated that policy, some kind of statement that was overheard, in anger towards another player, and it got him in some hot water there. So he has a history of misbehaving, we could say clearly. And that was a reputation that stayed with him all the way up until the time the Rangers got him. As far as his teammates and how they view him, see, it's interesting, and I wrote about this in my column last night. When I was able to be in the locker room every day last year, and Tony was having this breakout season and was playing really well, I think that can kind of cover up some other stuff. I think when you're playing well and when you're really contributing to the team, and at the time, again, it was less polarizing before the pandemic politically at the time. And so I think that his teammates knew that Tony was active on social media. They knew that he was vocal about what he believed in, but he was producing on the ice. And in terms of how he was in the locker room, he's a loud guy. He's a boisterous guy. He was definitely one of the big pranksters, kind of joking guys in that locker room. But I think almost everybody in that locker room accepted him for who he was. A lot of them liked him. I know that there was a core of Rangers, guys like Brendan Lemieux, Ryan Strome, Adam Fox, who are pretty tight with Tony DeAngelo. So he definitely has some close friends on that team. And I think that last year, during the season, it was, Tony being Tony, and everybody kind of laughed it off when they felt like, he was diving into the politics and things like that. I think it changed a little bit once the pandemic hit, because the political climate got more polarizing, the racial tensions tightened, and Tony was very vocal throughout all of that. And again, the issues where he got himself in trouble, Kevin, as you touched on, was not necessarily the politics, although that did turn him off to a lot of fans. I mean, the fans, that made him kind of a lightning rod of criticism for the fans. It got to the point where anytime you said anything about Tony DeAngelo, it was this big thing because people didn't agree with his politics. And I had asked him during the season last year, like, Tony, why do you go into that stuff? What do you see as the upside? I wrote a whole story about his social media usage before the pandemic hit. And he basically said, listen, I'm the kind of guy who likes to scroll my phone. I like to see what people are saying, and I like to offer my own opinion. And he told me at the time that the Rangers hadn't taken issue with it. But I know since then, you mentioned the fighting incident. I know the Rangers had a big PR mess on their hands after the election when Tony sarcastically put out this tweet questioning why people weren't talking about COVID-19. And again, that was incredibly tone deaf, because you are playing and representing a city that has been devastated by the virus. So that was a PR mess for the Rangers. And those are things that go beyond politics. And then the parlor thing, which we talked about last time I was on this program, there's just been this series of headaches that he's created for the Rangers. And I know what the Rangers had tried to previously get through to him was, why are you doing this? Why do you feel the need to seek attention in this way and cast a negative light on our team? So that was kind of the situation. And what was interesting was that they had a talk with Tony, I know, toward the end of the summer after that incident where he was fighting with fans on Twitter. And he was kind of on his best behavior for a couple months leading into that, because he was in the process of negotiating his contract. So for September and October, he was pretty quiet on social media. It was really just sticking to sports and that sort of thing. But then once he got his contract and November came around, after the election, that COVID thing happened. And then since then, there's been a pattern of, again, him kind of making these inflammatory and borderline irresponsible comments, and the Rangers having to clean up the mess.
Excuse me. So the mechanics now, he now goes on waivers. So by noon, if he hasn't been picked up, the mechanics are then that he can be sent to the minors. So the Rangers will only save about $1 million on the cap if that happens, correct? That's the correct
Yes,
number.
correct.
Or they can attempt to terminate that contract and saying that he breached the contract. Do you know if the Rangers have planned that out or what they want to do, or do you know what their plan is?
I'm sure that they are looking into the possibility of termination. I don't know if they'd be able to pull it off. I mean, in terms of the finer print and the legal side of that, they would obviously have a fight on their hands. I've heard that it would be very difficult. So I don't know if they would be able to bank on doing that. I've examined all the different possibilities. I can't see them wanting to send him to the taxi squad or send him to Hartford, their AHL affiliate, and kind of keep him around the team, given everything that's going on. So the more I thought about it last night, I think the best solution for them ultimately might be if a team, assuming a team doesn't claim him and they can't find a trade partner, is they basically say, listen, we're going to stick you on the taxi squad or stick you on the Hartford roster, but we really don't want you around. We're going to send you home and let him kind of sit out the rest of the season. And then once the summer comes around, they can buy out the final year of his contract. And the buyout penalties are actually pretty manageable. It would be a cap hit that they'd be left with of under $400,000 for next season. And then it would be under $1 million for the season after. So as far as buyouts go, those cap hits are much more manageable than some of the others we've seen when the Rangers have bought out guys like Lundqvist and Shattenkirk. So to me, that might be the most logical path, is they basically grit their teeth and deal with it for this season and kind of push him off to the side as best they can. And then, in the offseason, I think you'd be likely to see a buyout.
Vince, we've talked about his off ice, but let's talk a little bit about his on ice performance. I mean, you've talked about how good he was last season offensively, but this season it's been a bit of a struggle for him. And if I read correctly, he was on the ice for 4 goals and was -3 in that last game. And he only has 1 assist. Has he struggled on the ice this season? And if so, why?
Absolutely. So the thing with Tony is, even going back to last season, defensively, he was always considered a little bit of a liability. He was a bottom pair guy last year for them, but he racked up points in large part because he was the quarterback of their power play, and he's very, very effective in that role. So the Rangers kind of knew that they had a guy who would produce points, but wasn't going to be a guy they would put on their top 2 pairs and expect to shut down, the top forwards for opposing teams. This season, now granted, it's an extremely small sample size. The Rangers have only played 8 games, and he's only been in 6 of them. He was benched for 2 games because he took an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty in the very first game of the year, another disciplinary thing that the Rangers did with him. And they sat him for 1 game. They blew out the Islanders in that game, so Quinn rode the lineup into a second game, and he ended up missing 2 games. So he's only played 6 games. But yes, defensively, he continues to struggle. I believe he's a -6 for the season. I believe his goal, the Rangers, for every 60 minutes that D'Angelo plays, the Rangers are averaging giving up roughly 6.5 goals. So defensively, clearly he has not been good. In his defense, I will say that his partner has been an issue this season. He consistently played with Mark Stahl for his first couple years. And now this year, they mostly paired him with Jack Johnson, who has had his own issues defensively. And then they had him with Brendan Smith for a couple games recently. That hasn't been working out either. So he has not had a great partner to work with in his defense. But his defense clearly has been an issue. And then on top of that, offensively, he didn't get his first point until the game Saturday. That was a secondary assist. So yeah, he has really not been giving them the offense that they thought that they were paying for in this small sample size. So I think that if he had been playing well, like if he had 5 or 6 points already, would they have made the same decision? It's hard to say for sure. But given the fact that he's not playing well and that the headaches have been kind of piling up with, some kind of a fight with your teammate being the final straw, that's what led to this decision.
You look at other players in different situations, Sean Avery and PK Subban. I think with those guys, they really kind of had a plan, like a marketing plan. They're branding themselves for after the game. But with Tony, it's like there doesn't seem to be a plan. It's almost like there's a troubled kid there that needs to get some help. So you feel like the Rangers have tried to help him in the past, like get somebody to talk to him, and it just hasn't worked. Like he's held off for a while, and then he just snaps again.
He's very impulsive. He's very impulsive. And this came up in my conversations with him. I will say this about Tony. I think I mentioned this to you guys last time. I would go up to him in the locker room and talk to him pretty frequently because he was a straight shooter. You knew when you went over to talk to him that he was going to give you an honest answer, and you could bring anything up with him. I would say, Tony, I saw this tweet last night. Like, what was that about? And he would tell you what his thought process was. But I think it was a lot of times impulsive. I think he's the kind of guy, and this is why a lot of teams discourage players from scrolling social media too frequently, because it's easy to get caught up in all the criticism. I mean, if you look at what people are saying about you, people say all kinds of crazy stuff on social media, but Tony would see this stuff and he would snap back. And that's what ended up getting him into trouble a lot of the time. So definitely an impulsive guy. As far as what the Rangers did to try to help him, at the time when I spoke to him, when I could still see him in person about all this, he said the Rangers really hadn't taken any issue with it. And at that point, you could argue he hadn't really said anything too bad on social media. Since then, though, with the pandemic hitting and him being really active, I know that they addressed it with him several times, just kind of trying to ration with him and say, what do you see as the upside in this? Why are you causing these kind of problems for us? This stuff doesn't shine a positive light on the franchise. I don't know if they went as far as, suggesting that he gets some kind of help. And I actually finished my column yesterday by saying that at the end of the day, I know a lot of people don't like him and he did all this to himself. He only has himself to blame, but you do hope that he can maybe find a way to better himself, find a way to grow up a little bit, grow from all of this, because it is kind of a sad state of affairs. It's a talented player who, it's hard to say how bad of a guy he is. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not here to judge his character. I'm just looking at the things that he's done, why they've been questionable, and what the Rangers' reaction has been. And I know that there's been a series of things that the Rangers have said, why are you doing this? This is not helpful for anybody. But yeah, I do think that the next step is, can he find a way to better himself? Does he need some kind of help? I don't know what the answers are, but I would definitely hope that would be the next step. And you would hope that the Rangers would do something to facilitate that. Although right now, I don't think that relationship is very good.
Well, Vince, we appreciate having you on. We've run out of time for this segment, but before you head out the door, the Rangers goaltending save percentage is in the 0.89 range. You're probably going to have to be in the 0.920 range if you're going to make the playoffs. Is this a reflection of how they're playing or how the defense is playing?
The defense, Kevin, has actually been better. If you look at the numbers, the defense I felt was the biggest issue coming into the season. I think we talked about that last time.
Right.
And if you look at their shots against, it's down on average by like about 8 shots per game. So they have really done a better job defensively. Quinn has harped on puck management. He feels like they make too many east-west kind of risky plays, and it leads to turnovers, and that kind of puts them in a vulnerable position defensively. But I think the defense has been better. They brought in Jacques Martin as a new assistant coach to help with that regard. The goaltending has not been great. That has been one of the biggest issues for this team. And Quinn's taking some heat right now because he decided that he's going to go with this every other game model, basically starting Igor Shesterkin one day, Alex Georgiev the next day, and just rotating it like that. A lot of people felt that Igor had earned the right, even though he only played 12 games last season, to enter as the number one, and that this makes it hard for him to build momentum. I personally feel that if one of them had clearly been playing well, that you would see Quinn ride one of them. That's been his history. That's what he has done in the past when he gets a hot goaltender. And I think it's only a matter of, when one of those guys starts doing that, he will lean on one or the other. I think a lot of people anticipate that would be Shesterkin. But goaltending has been an issue, and the other big issue for this team, in my mind, has been their top guys. You can go down the line: Artemi Panarin, Mika Zibanejad, Ryan Strome, Tony DeAngelo, Chris Kreider. The guys that had been their big offensive producers last year have really all had lackluster starts to the season. So when your top 6 and your top guys aren't producing and your goaltending is shaky, it's going to be hard to win, especially in a division like that.
All right, Vince. Well, we appreciate your time as always and your insight, and hope to have you on later in the season.
Thanks, Vince.
Guys. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
That was Vince Mercogliano of Lohud.com and the USA Today Network, the Rangers beat writer, talking and giving a pretty good wrap-up of what's happened with Tony DeAngelo there. And, Tom is a former player. You've been in dressing rooms before. You've had, I'm sure, teammates who kind of rub you the wrong way sometimes. How do you view this situation?
Well, I guess my first reaction is you feel bad. I mean, you're right. I played with not a lot of guys, but I played with guys that just other guys didn't like. They rub people the wrong way. But we always felt like, okay, that's our teammate, right? Above all else, he's my teammate, so I'm going to fight for him. I remember when Sean Avery was in Dallas and he made some inappropriate comments about females, and all his other teammates, not all his other teammates, a few of his other teammates were coming out publicly and saying things about him. And I remember you and I had the discussion about it too. It's like, well, that's just not the way it works. If you don't like what he's doing behind the scenes, well, go spank him. Like, there was fights in practice. I mean, great friends. I remember George McPhee and Steve Richmond. Stick swinging incident at the Rye Playland at our practice facility. So guys have issues with each other and we work it out behind the scenes. So for it to get to that point that it's that bad that they now put him on waivers, I mean, and Vince touched on it. There's a lot of things have had to happen, incidents and his attitude and everything. I just feel like, man, it's like, again, like I mentioned, PK Subban, Sean Avery, those kind of guys, again, different situation. They're branding themselves. They're marketing themselves, right? They're not afraid to step out and be different than everybody else. I just feel like this young guy needs some help. And I mean, if you feel bad for him as a person, you feel bad for him as a player because, he's such a talented player. He should be in the National Hockey League and helping the Rangers win hockey games. It's like he needs to get some help. But it's one of those deals. I feel like he's just an immature kid who just doesn't realize what he's doing, and if he could get some help, I just hate to see the Rangers or any team throw him away at any player. It doesn't matter how talented he is, but particularly this player, because he is so talented, he can help them win hockey games. So you feel bad for him and you feel bad for the Rangers.
Yeah. I agree with you, Tom. I've thought about this a little bit, and, we've seen some issues where, you're not so sure they ought to get another chance, at least not quickly. But I don't think this is one of them. I agree with you. I think this is a guy, and Vince even pointed out about he liked talking to him. He's a straight shooter. He's being truthful. That's who he is. And again, I hate the representation of this as being about his politics. There may be fans that don't like his politics, but that's the way the world is today.
Yeah.
I think this is an issue about saying things that are inappropriate. Or that can cause issues for your employer, and challenging somebody to a fight, saying things in a locker room that might cause some issue, whatever issue he had with the goalie. Clearly the Rangers believed that it was his fault and not the goalie's, because we don't hear anything about the goalie being punished.
Yep.
And all those are issues that, could speak to, an impulsive nature, to immaturity. And I'm sure they could all be corrected. And then, he had 53 points last year as a defenseman, in 60 some games. So, there aren't enough of those, 50-point defensemen around. Like, there's a place for him in the game. He just needs to become, and you hate to say a guy that conforms to the rules, because sometimes we like guys that think outside the box.
Sure.
But we do. We need them to conform to the rules. People have always kind of got the free speech argument wrong. They think that it allows you to speak your mind at all times without fear of consequences, but it doesn't. It gives you freedom from being prosecuted by the government for saying something. Yep. But we still all, no matter where you work, have to adhere to the rules. I don't care whether you work.
Yeah, and the number one rule in hockey is you help your team win hockey games. That's the number one rule. And that comes in a lot of different forms. That's on the ice, performing the duties that you're supposed to do, like the coach wants you to do. It's how you treat the fans. And you got to remember, too, Madison Square Gardens, which the Rangers is part of, is a publicly traded company. So there's business issues here. There's team issues here. Listen, what I hope? I hope that he clears waivers, and that maybe this happening to him will wake him up and make him realize that, okay, I need to change my ways, right? This, to me, the best scenario would be that that's what happens, that he steps back for a while. He says, and listen, maybe he needs help. He needs somebody to help him, to go talk to him, to make sure he sees how people are viewing him now and what he can do to change things. But you're right. The players are all there to help the team win. And again, it comes in all these different forms. And again, you cannot be doing things where you're challenging your own fans to fights. It's just that kind of stuff just doesn't happen. And again, it's so counterproductive to helping the team win and the perception of the team and him as an individual. So again, I hope he gets help. I hope it doesn't mean the end of a career. And I hope it helps him as a person too. To me, that's the thing that's really important is that, yes, he's a hockey player and he's a very good hockey player that can help the team win or help some other team win. But as a person, he just can't keep acting like that. It's, and listen, maybe that's obviously it's gotten to this point. He's making a lot of money, but it's not going to make him last much longer in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, and I don't think we've seen the last of him. I mean, I would think that he would understand this, what's happening. I mean, he may not agree with it right now, but I think at some point, if he goes and starts talking to professionals about it, they'll certainly point out about how your behavior within the framework of your work environment going to dictates how successful you're going to be. And, and again, as I, keep harping on, no matter where you work, I don't care if you're working, in a fast food joint or a factory or a CPA office, or, there are rules you got to sort of live by because you have to have harmony. And as you mentioned, in sports, it's even more important to have harmony. So, you can't have a situation where, you're going to be a fire starter for tension in the room.
Yeah.
But I thought Vince spelled out a pretty practical solution for the Rangers because I can't imagine someone's going to pick him up.
Yeah.
So he'll clear waivers. So you don't really want him around the team. So you send him home. You give him, and this is a shortened season, so it's not as difficult for him. That gives him time to get his act together. You buy him out, and then he'll get a second chance or third chance, whatever we want to call this, with some other team next year, and hopefully he'll be a little bit different player. And I think that's what the best case scenario would be for both parties at this point.
Yeah. Totally, yeah. And it's interesting too, I forgot that we did an event, obviously well over a year and a half ago, I think it was, down in the city. And there's a few alumni guys there and some current players. And he was one of the current players. And I think it was right after the game we scored 5 goals. So we were giving it to him, like, I was joking around with him that I hadn't scored 5 goals in the whole season. And he was a really engaging kid. You could tell that he had a real personality. He was not a wallflower, but he was a really engaging kid. And a lot of people and fans are writing stuff in now saying that their interactions with him is he's a great kid. So I think there's a good kid in there. I think there's an excellent hockey player there, and hope he gets the help that he needs, I think.
Yeah, I mean, as members of the media, I never like to be hypocritical. On one hand, I always root for athletes to have personalities, to have opinions, to be able to talk about issues beyond hockey. So I don't want to, criticize them, if they walk that line a little bit. Now, you can't go over the line, unfortunately, and it's sometimes it's a hard one to figure out for some people, and obviously it was, for Tony. But let's move on there are other subjects here that I wanted to get out. I was looking at that All-Canadian division, and Tom, this has been, in my mind, as entertaining as I expected it to be. 5 of the 7 teams in that division have positive goal differentials. We have the Toronto Maple Leafs up near the top, even though I know they made a couple of changes you didn't like because you thought they were, changing their identity a little bit. I think it's worked for them. I think they're still the team they want to be, but they have a little bit more bite, and maybe their defense is a little bit better. But the real story, I think, is still the Canadians. All the off-season changes they made seems to have really transformed that team. And boy, I'll tell you what I really like, and this is what I want to talk to you about first, is their defense. I'm not so sure they're not the best transition defense in the league right now. Boy, can they get the puck out of their zone. And everyone seems to do it. And if you're a Canadian forward, you got to love it. That suddenly, the puck's deep in your own zone. Next thing you know, it's flying out to you, and you're, on flying down the wing. It's really been impressive when you watch them play, how they move the puck out of their zone.
Yeah, it's really the old Montreal Canadiens style, right? Going way back to the 70s and 80s. So guys like Larry Robinson, Serge Savard, and everybody getting the puck up so quick. Yeah, they're fun to watch. I'm a huge fan of Shea Weber. I love the way he played. And you go back real quick, just go back to Toronto real quickly too. I'm really impressed. And you're right. I was critical of them, but they're even doing it without Joe Thornton. Now, not that Joe Thornton was going to make that big of a difference, but they brought him in for a reason, right? He was that leader guy and help out. So they're doing it without him too. So you got to give them a lot of credit. But yeah, Montreal's fun to watch. The team that I'm kind of surprised in that division, I didn't think Ottawa was going to be, a contender to make the playoffs, but man, they're struggling a lot of their games now. They brought in some older guys like Derek Stepan, former Ranger, and guy Colburn from Tampa and everything to try to get some leadership in there to help them win. But I even saw a quote by Stepan was saying that they're a real fragile group right now, those young kids. So you feel bad for them because you don't want to have. Again, you don't want to mortgage the future and have all these veteran guys there taking up roster spots. But the reason you've got them there is that they don't get into those losing spells where they're just getting hammered, 6-1 all the time. And that's happening to them right now. So you kind of feel bad for that organization. I didn't think it would be that bad. But again, it's early in the season, but I didn't think they'd be as bad as they are. Vancouver's playing better too. Everybody was thinking they were struggling, but yeah, they're getting going now too. So.
Yeah, well, I still like what Pierre Dorion did there in the offseason. I think he's pulling the right levers. I think he has them headed in the right direction. And I didn't expect they were going to be great. I guess I did expect them to be more competitive than they've been recently. Yeah. Saying that and just going back to the Canadiens a little bit, I think what's really fun to me is, when we tend to cast coaches into, style of play, and we've always viewed Claude Julien, particularly coming out of Boston, the way he did, as a defensive-minded coach.
Yeah.
But I think, like a lot of coaches, Scotty Bowman was probably the best example of this. He's evolved with the game, and he's evolved based on the team he had. And I think Claude Julien, you watch that team now, you wouldn't say that he's a defensive-minded coach. He's letting the horses run a little bit.
Yeah.
They're moving up the ice. I think he's a little bit different now, and I think it just reflects the recognition that he has different group of athletes than he's had in the past.
Definitely. What do you think of the hockey so far, just in general? Here's my concern. I had some Ranger fans make comments that they're not playing well defensively. As a group of five, or really 6 players on the ice at the same time. But I got to tell you, around the league, I see a lot of that. I don't know if I was talking to some other former players and we mentioned the same thing. A lot of guys, like in the defensive zone, they're all looking at the puck, not picking up their man. And I don't know if that's just the nature of the game now. These young players are coming up and they're always so talented as players. And they're more like offensive players. That's the way the game is shifting, right? So are they now not learning how to play defense at that younger age? And it's now a struggle for these coaches to get them, very little practice time, short training camps now because of the pandemic. Are they not given a chance to really try to teach them the defensive side of the game?
I'm not sure it is that, Tom. And I say that only because, what do you hear complaints in youth hockey is that, you have these coaches that are, trying to teach 9-year-olds, group defense. Like, they've all been, even youth coaches today, talk about defense, far more than.
So, but I also see a lot of hockey, at least at upper levels, like those elite programs, right, where a lot of coaches are just playing like their top 6 forwards and their top 4 defensemen, right, and they're just rolling them, and they're so talented. If they're all those talented kids, well, if we're winning 9-8, well, all right, we're winning 9-8. Listen, maybe it's the old guy, maybe it's the old school guy, me too, is thinking, that's not the way we played it back then. But I do think the defensive side of the game is not as strong as it has been in the past. But the flip side is the offensive side of the game is probably better too.
Yeah, before we meet on Wednesday, I'll look up and see where we are defensively in terms of goals and everything, because it does feel like to me like there's been some more goals, and I really haven't paid much attention to whether it's up or down or whatever. But it's I like scoring chances. I say all the time, what I miss is the 1980s. And why do I miss the 80s? Because we had mistakes in the 80s. And when we had defensive mistakes, you could roar around them. At least Bossy could and a few others could roar around them and score some goals. And then everybody just tightened up defensively. And there were fewer mistakes, so fewer goals.
Yeah.
So I do see that. But yeah, going back to that division, yeah, I think Vancouver. This is my read on that, and I think the Rangers had difficulty with that as well. Which is, you have younger players, and they were playing on momentum, both the Rangers and the Canucks last year, and then now they're back. They're a year older. They've had time to sort of digest what it's all about, and they didn't even know to be concerned about things last year that they are concerned about this year, and it's just a little bit different because of that. That's why sometimes you see young goalies. They come up and they're really, really good because they're not really thinking about what they're doing. They're just playing on reaction. And then they come back the second season and, they've had the time to sort of figure it all out. And then they start to get the nerves and to have the issues that, all young players have.
Speaking of goalies in that Canadian division, I saw Markstrom playing the other night there for Calgary. Man, I didn't realize, man, he's a good goaltender, man. He's good, really good.
Yeah, that really makes the difference. And, that Calgary team's only 500, but they're a better team than they were a year ago and because of him. And I think that really, it makes a difference and makes them competitive for a playoff spot.
Yeah. How about Edmonton last night, too? Is it Draisaitl got 6 points and McDavid got 5? They're going to have to keep doing that too. It's the same thing as last year. It doesn't look like that team has really changed that much too. Those two guys are going to have to carry them.
Well, yeah, and it's a shame. And we had talked about this off the air, but it's what I say about the Oilers all the time. It's important for the league that this Edmonton team figures out what they're doing there, because we've got to get Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. These are two highly entertaining players. Yeah. And we've got to get them in the playoffs for an extended period. You don't have to win it, but they got to, get into the playoffs, and you got to be able to last beyond a round or two. And, it's just a shame because, they're remarkable players.
Yeah.
They're two of the top 5 players in the world today. And it's iffy that they're going to make the playoffs.
I know. And we're both big fans of Kenny Holland from his days in Detroit. And, he's now running the ship there now. So you'd think he's going to get it straightened away. But I guess it's kind of a reflection of that organization, where it had gone right now. And I don't know who was to blame for all that, but it was just basically all those first overall draft picks and they didn't really do much else to build the team up, right? It just seems like those talented kids. But
yeah, the one thing that I questioned Ken on was, why he didn't get a goalie. Maybe he tried and nobody wanted to come there. I mean, we don't know the answer to that. But if you're rating goaltending in that division, and I said this before the season started, where do you rate the Oilers? I rate them last. Maybe second to last, but they're just some good goalies, in that division. Their goaltending is average at best.
Well, that's a good point, Peter. There's a lot of good goaltenders. Look at Carey Price there, Connor Hellebuck, all those kids. Yeah, well, that is a really good division for goal. And even Murray with Ottawa has shown that he can be a good goaltender. So
he's won the cup. And Freddie Anderson, for all the criticism directed at him, I like Freddie Anderson. Yeah. I think he's a quality goalie, and if I was the Edmonton fans, I'd want him more than Koskinen and.
Totally. Yeah. It's interesting too. You talk about Montreal there too, and it's a good point. But you think back, it wasn't too long ago where Mark Bergevin, the general manager, was in some hot water, right? People thinking he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't have a very good team. Now Carey Price has been hurt. Shea Weber had been hurt. Now those guys are healthy again. He's made some good trades. But that team really looking up. I like what they've done.
Yeah, and he's so good the Pittsburgh Penguins want to steal him. That's
is that right?
Well, I mean, I've seen him listed on candidates for that Pittsburgh job because he and Mario are buddies.
That's right.
But
you see where Scott Mellenby, I guess, had taken his name out of the running for that job, right? I guess he'd interviewed. And see, I always wondered about that. So guys go in and interview. And then now they decide, do they think that they're not going to get the job? So they then come out and say, well, I don't want the job.
Yeah. I don't know, what the situation is, but if you're a Pittsburgh fan, the news there that I think is important is Morehouse saying, look, we're not rebuilding. We're
that's right. I forgot to touch on this. That's right. Yes. We had that discussion with Joe Starkey, right?
Yeah, they're not rebuilding, and they're going to move forward. And I think that's important. Because I thought, look, the difference between having Rutherford and not having Rutherford would be, can the new guy make the move or two that Rutherford was going to make that could get him in the playoffs? Like I'm pretty confident in the Penguins' ability to make the playoffs if they can add a veteran defenseman. And the rumors were that Rutherford was poking around trying to get one. So what happened?
So why would Jimmy Rutherford retire then? And at this time, something had to have happened that he
Well,
retired.
I mean, there was all sorts of speculation that it was about, that his contract. They hadn't, looked to extend it. That there was some have suggested that, even though I find this hard to believe, that he had talked about moving Letang, and the ownership or upper management didn't want that. I mean, I don't know if any of that's true, right. But it's probably a combination of factors, would be my guess. Right. But I don't think Jim Rutherford is done.
No,
I think he'll set out a few months. He'll spend time with his family. And then I think, depending on what happens with teams around the league, he'll entertain ideas of jumping back in. And I mean, who knows what team might be available after the season.
Trying to think of the places where you're available. That's interesting.
And with regard to the Penguins, I mean, there are some. The one thing that's happened to the Penguins, they had like people in waiting. Tom Fitzgerald, they had Billy Guerin, they had Jason Botterill, who have all come through there, and they all went out and got GM jobs. Botterill, of course, has now lost his job in Buffalo. So is Botterill a candidate? Obviously Bill Guerin's content there, but I've heard rumblings that maybe Fitzgerald would be the Penguins' choice as well. So
how about Ray Shero coming back?
Well, I don't see that happen. I think bridges were burned there. But I just, I think they've gone down that path. Although that was my first thought right away. Yeah. If you said to me who has the right personality and the kind of get things done attitude that Penguins need, I'd say Ray Shero.
Because it's going to be kind of a tough job, right? To have Mario Lemieux as one of your bosses.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a pretty intimidating guy, right? It's got to be somebody that's pretty confident. To me, it's like not just managing below you, but managing above you too, right? Because you've got to include Mario, and you have to include Mario in the decisions, not all the everyday little decisions, but those big trades. You've got to be going to him and saying, "Listen, Mario, here's what we're doing." Right? I mean,
he's long had the reputation of giving his GMs free reign, but that doesn't mean that his aura, doesn't hang over you. Totally. Because I mean, I don't care who you are. The guy above you that owns the team knows more about the game than you do, probably.
Yeah. One of the all-time greatest players is one of your bosses,
Right. So, it's I'll tell you an interesting guy, and though other people have not put him on their list, maybe because they don't think the Penguins would hire a Flyers great, but I think Ron Hextall would be a good fit there. Yeah. This is my argument, because on the surface, they're not a good fit. Because Hextall is patient, and he is a builder.
Yes.
And the Penguins are a let's do it today type of organization. And Hextall essentially lost his job in Philadelphia because he wanted to be patient with players like Carter Hart and the good young players. And I think the ownership said, look, let's fast forward it a little bit. Let's accelerate it. Right. I think he eventually lost his job. But I think this is my point about the Penguins. They probably need to change a little bit because they've got older superstars, so they need to place greater emphasis on bringing together some draft picks and getting some younger players and into the mix and so forth. And Hextall probably needs to change his approach a little bit. To make it more immediate and also include that. So they actually might be a real good fit. But
it's going to have to be somebody with some experience, right? Because if they want to stay in the hunt, they've got to be making some trades. So it means that you've got to have a general manager that can call up the other GMs around the league and they're not going to try to take advantage of some young kid, right? That's not experienced at all. So,
yeah, well, Hexie could do that. I mean, obviously, he's the Flyers general manager, but I'm not sure he's even, one of the top candidates. Now, the other interesting name is Pat Brisson, who's an agent and long been a friend of Mario Lemieux, and Brisson has been rumored with so many GM jobs. A lot of people thought that the only one he would probably take would be the LA job. He's very close with Luc Robitaille, who was out there, because he makes a lot of money. He is one of the top agents. But I don't know. I actually think Pat Brisson would do a great job. I love his personality. I think it would be great for the Penguins. He knows a lot about the game. Pat does, and
he's got relationships with all the GMs around the league. That's for sure. When you're an agent of that size,
for sure.
How do we know that he'd be good, though? I mean, I know
we don't.
He's a smart hockey man, but
how do you know anybody would be good?
Well, the GMs with experience, they've done it, right?
The track record, yeah.
Right. How about Brian? How about Brian Burke?
Yeah, Brian Burke would be interesting. So, they'd get tougher though. We know that.
And there's the guy's been around too. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, that would be. I haven't seen his name, but that would be outstanding. Actually, it would be
great for the league too. Yeah,
it would have been. It would be fun.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've probably gone a little too long today, but lots of things to discuss today, and we talked obviously about Tony DeAngelo and with the Rangers, and that will unfold today at noon. Waivers probably will expire on him, and the Rangers will have to announce what they're going to do. But make sure you come back on Wednesday. We'll have a different guest talking about a different subject, although I'm sure we'll talk about DeAngelo a little bit as well. And make sure if you like our podcast, I do another one with Bob Duff on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 4:00 on hockeydebates.com. And Tom, tell everyone where to find this broadcast on YouTube.
Yep, you can see you listen to the radio version of this on radio.co at 365 Sports. Again, that's radio.co at 365 Sports. And again, you can Kevin's doing a lot of writing on hockeybuzz.com as well. You're all over the place.
Yeah, I try. Try to stay relevant.
All right, buddy. See you Wednesday.